Welcome to
4Kids Flashback. Hello and welcome to 4Kids Flashback. I am Tara Sands, joined by my co-host
Steve Yurko.
Steve. You added an H.
Yeah.
Steheve. Yeah, that's good.
I'm trying it out, see how it works, you know. I think I was really just kind of going off of the melody there, or the tempo, the syllables.
Because it's a music-related interview, you wanted to get some vocal stuff into the beginning. I get it.
I didn't want to reveal my hand there, but yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, because we have a music department guest today, Sue Shufro, who is a music editor. So that's somebody who, I never came into contact with in the 4Kids offices. So I'm very excited to learn about that job. Was she mentioned
before in the Siegler episode or off mic? Okay.
Yes. Siegler raved about her, and as did Susie Goldish. So I selfishly am very happy to meet the person who brought Susie into 4Kids, because Susie's, over the years become one of my best friends. And if not for Sue, I wouldn't have my friend Susie. So that's my angle on all of it. But yeah, she seems cool. I think that's a cool sounding job too, music editor, because it combines two different skills. You have to have an ear and also a more technical side of things, but you're setting the mood of the scene. I think that's to me, that's a high pressure job. And
considering that, with the exception of early Pokemon episodes, every show had a different soundtrack in the 4Kids version. So it is a lot to keep track of. And she goes into detail about that process.
Right. And so, Pokemon did keep some Japanese original music. You probably know better than I do. What did the other shows have a hybrid, or were they?
As far as I know, I think Pokemon was the only show that had that original score. Things were changed here and there. I think after a while, I think that's not the case anymore. I, of course, was not, I didn't keep up with Pokemon after a while, but in those early years, the years you were on the show, most of that was the Japanese score, with the occasion, if a vocal song is thrown in there. That, of course, is,
right.
the dub version.
Like the Pokemon Hoedown.
I don't. Was there an episode with the Pokemon Hoedown? I don't know.
Yes.
Okay. I know the song exists.
We talked about that with Jim Malone, I think. I think that's how we talked when we talked about that. But yeah, so I'm excited about that. I still have to watch one of the Pokemon movies. I've watched two with the commentary track, and the third one I have has a commentary track, and I know Maddie Blaustein is part of it, and I think I've been putting off listening to it because I think it's going to be tough to watch since she passed. But I know that it probably will be really insightful to watch that last DVD with the commentary. So maybe we'll have to do some kind of event around that or something to
that would be interesting. Yeah, I've listened to the commentary tracks for the first movie and the third movie. But I've not seen this one either. I don't think I've just seen this movie at all. I don't think I've saw 2000 either. So.
Right. You have my DVDs. I forgot about that. I do.
Yeah.
That's right. Have to get those back one day.
Never.
So yes, we will be, you own them now. That's fine. We will be talking to Sue in just a minute, and some podcasty, businessy stuff. You can, find us at 4kidsflashback.com. Use the number 4 to get links to all the places to listen, to get links to buy show merch, to find links to our YouTube channel that has a cool compilation of just everything 4Kids you could possibly want. What am I forgetting?
Patreon.
Oh, yes. Tell them. Tell the people.
You like us all that much. You want to support us more. Go to patreon.com, chip in some money, and you get access to episodes that are episodes of the podcast that are a week early, ad-free, as well as some bonus content on there, some videos we're digging up, some scripts we're finding, a whole bunch of other stuff there. That's over at patreon.com/4kidsflashback with the number 4.
4.
4.
And here's Sue. Our guest today is Sue Shufro. Sue worked on basically every show at 4Kids. I could name them all, but it would take forever. I mean, Dinosaur King, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Go-Go Riki, which we don't get into that much on this show, Ultramantiga, Tama and Friends. I mean, the long-lost Tama and Friends. She was the music editor there, which is new to this podcast, so we're going to have her just explain what that is to us. But thank you so much for being here, Sue.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So you are sort of a cross between the editing department and the music department. Is that kind of your role? I mean, did you consider yourself more of an editor or in the music department?
Music department and editing. So it would be more like audio editing. So, yeah.
Do you have a music back? Can you talk a little about how you got into this line of work and your journey to 4Kids?
My journey. It was a journey. I always studied classical piano as a kid, a little bit of guitar. And then in college, I was interested in learning how to compose music. And that led me to, I took some classes in composing, and then I ended up in a grad school program at NYU in music technology, thinking I was going to score films. And I learned all about film scoring and music technology, electronic music composition. And I can go on more about the journey if you want to know. But yeah, That's my music background.
Yeah, I mean, when you say music technology, that's like a term. We've had so many NYU grads, which is so cool on the show. What is music technology? Is it, because when you say film scoring, I think of that as an artistic endeavor, but then when you say technology, that sounds more like the science of it.
Yes, there's the art and the science. So music technology would be anything from, recording and mixing music, using, learning to use all of that gear. And then branching from what used to be just magnetic tape recording. And then when I was at NYU, it was going from mag tape to digital. And I was right there at that sort of evolution.
Yeah.
So learning computer, all of that end of making music and recording music and editing music and producing music. So it's a pretty wide, it casts a wide net when you talk about music technology.
Yeah, when I took one audio class in college and I literally had a razor blade and tape. And I wish that everyone who learned it now had to just do that one lesson, just because what they gave us numbers out of order, and then we had to put them in order. And I was like, oh, I'm terrible at this, but I'm decent when it's on the computer. But it's that fundamental thing of, okay, I understand. I don't know. I think it was a good lesson, even though the technology was starting to exist.
Absolutely. I worked on a couple of student films even before grad school, and it was all on tape. And I was sitting in an edit room with a picture editor helping get the music into the film on tape, on mag tape. So I'm really glad I had that experience. And then now everything is Pro Tools and a hard drive, and that's all you need is your computer and a hard drive.
I mean, if you had told young Sue that you'd be doing all this from home on a tiny computer, it's mind-blowing to me what we can do. I mean, we started on VHS tapes at 4Kids, right?
Yes.
You were using...
Correct. Yeah. There was an evolution even then. I started at 4Kids, I guess it was 98. When
Pokemon started, yeah.
Yeah.
So you were an really early Pokemon. That's right. You were an early employee there for 4Kids Productions, at least.
I was one of the first for the music. I was one of the first in the music team.
I just want to say, too, you worked, I would have fangirled so hard if I had met you during that time, because you worked on a movie called You Can Count on Me.
Oh, yes.
Which is like this, if you haven't seen it, it's a beautiful, because I was a Kenneth Lonergan drama school dork. But what a beautiful movie.
That was Kenny Lonergan's first movie. We called him Kenny.
I'm not allowed yet. I haven't earned that yet. Yeah.
That was his very first film that he directed. he was a writer, an amazing writer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was his first film directing. In fact, Kenny, I love you. The first thing he did when he met me was, Sue, what does a music editor do? So I have to answer that question.
So we basically asked you the same thing, Kenny and I. Yeah.
Yes. No, he's a very experienced, I think Oscar-winning director. So he knows everything about filmmaking. But when he first started, that was a wonderful experience working on that film.
So that was pre 4Kids. Right?
That was
It says 90. It says 2000 on here, but you probably edited it before that.
It was all. I was working on 4Kids, and I would get a leave of absence to work on films because I was already working on films when I was hired by 4Kids. And then whenever I got a job, I had an agreement with them that once Pokemon was under control. At first, when I first started with 4Kids, which was, I guess, around 98 with Pokemon, I was the only music editor, and it was a lot. And I was there, and I started training other music editors to do that work.
Thank God.
Too. So,
okay.
So I was working for 4Kids, and from time to time I was working on films. So You Can Count on Me was somewhere in all of that.
So do you remember who you interviewed with at your first meeting, or who brought you into 4Kids?
So how I got involved with 4Kids was when I was at NYU, I started interning at a music studio called Billows Debucci Music, a jingle house and music production studio. And I was hired. I went from intern to production assistant to assistant engineer and music editor. And I even started composing some jingles there.
Oh, cool.
And then just through that group of people and through some other personal friends I knew through grad school and elsewhere, I met a few people in other jingle houses like Rave Music and Not Just Jingles. Those are two other music houses in New York City. And they knew I was a music editor. And this is after I left Billows Debucci Music after I was there for 4.5 years. And then I left because I got a job with Howard Shore, the film composer.
Wow.
And I started working for Howard Shore. And so then I wasn't working full time anywhere. I was just working job to job to job. And then the people at Not Just Jingles and Rave Music, they were guys who knew each other. Mm-hmm. Including John Siegler and John Leffler at Rave Music, found out about me, and at the same time that they were getting hired to work on Pokemon and work for Norman. So they called me up, and it was actually John Sands. I don't know if you know about John Sands, but
we're not related. I've heard the name though. Yeah.
So Rave Music had about 17 Johns that worked there.
Yeah.
And a lot of them came over to 4Kids. So John Sands was the music producer for Pokemon. John Sands called me, and I just started the job, and they gave me VHS tapes with SIPT timecode on one audio track and the Japanese dialogue and effects on the other. Wait a minute. I'm trying to remember. I think I had just all of the audio on the other audio track of the VHS tape. And then I was given a clean audio track of the Japanese orchestral music, the original Japanese music, which, by the way, was amazing. We kept a lot of that music in for a lot of the big action scenes. And it was, I believe, if my memory is correct, it was live orchestral music, and it was beautiful. Wow. And I'm sorry I'm spacing the name of the composer. But so I would get that music as well, and then I would get a script of the English that was eventually going to be recorded. So I would have to work, and I was working on Pro Tools, a very, very early version of Pro Tools. I would have to work listening to the Japanese dialogue and reading the script, so I knew what they were going to say in English.
Was it written phonetically for you, or was it because it couldn't have been in kanji. You couldn't have followed it, obviously.
It was the English, so it was it Michael Hagney, whoever was writing the scripts at that time. Mm-hmm. It was the script, and it had the time code, so you knew where those lines were going to be, spoken, and you could kind of figure it out as you're watching, but you'd always have that guide, the time code, that's also visible on the tape, mm-hmm. on the videotape. So you always knew, you could follow along, but it was a lot of, sometimes sometimes I had to mute out the Japanese dialogue because I didn't know what they were saying.
Right. It wasn't helping
and
you.
It was, mix them with the sound effects. And then I was also given all of the music that was written for Pokemon up until that. I was hired on at maybe episode 10. I want to say they scored with American composers about 10 episodes before they hired me. And I had that much of the American music to work with. So the composers at that time were, of course, John Siegler, who did the theme song and some of the scoring, but most of the scoring of the TV show early on was John Lissauer and Manny Corallo. Oh. And then later on, there were a lot more composers who came on. And those two guys, they're New York City composers. John Lissauer is very well known. He helped produce Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah.
Wow.
And he's a saxophone player, reeds player, and so he would put a lot of his own playing on his music. And then Manny Corallo played accordion. So if you remember some of the music in the early Pokemon TV show, there was a lot of accordion.
It was accordion heavy?
Really.
What?
Well, sometimes, for some of the action, really fast accordion in there. Both really great composers.
So you were, I guess my question is, and again, I know so little, which is Steve knows way more than me about this. But so the final episodes were a combination of the Japanese original music and the new music. How was it decided not to just use shorter versions of the Japanese music and to even were you part of that discussion, or was that?
Well, I know why. Well, first of all, it had to do with money. Mm-hmm. And also, and I know you've had in other podcasts, the topic of Americanizing the show. So the music needed to be more American sounding too. There was always, in the early episodes, a couple of the original Japanese music in the show, but then we hired American composers to write. And then, like I said, there were 10 episodes about where it was all scored or used Japanese music. And then I came on to start editing the already written music, American music. The 4Kids wanted as much American music in the show as possible because of the back end, because of the royalties that you get on the back end. The composers got, of course, a certain percentage, but the producers did as well, of course. So moving on past when I started, every once in a while, they would still have some original American music written for the shows and all the following shows. They'd keep composers at bay, ready to write some original cues, and all those shows following that I worked on as well. But then I had to make a library, and I know John Siegler mentioned this. I had to create a music library out of the music that was written, the American music.
Right.
Every once in a while, they'd let me sort of pull something from the Japanese music, but they much preferred me to use the American music. And I made these incredibly organized libraries with folders of, action music, drama, incidental music. And then I had these, for every show I worked on, there'd be a huge folder of reacts. So, happy react. Things that music could, embellish reacts, which is something they always wanted. The hardest thing about editing for these shows was all the incidental scenes. where it's not action. So that was the most time consuming.
Every week since 2009, the One Piece podcast has discussed and analyzed the latest installments of the hit anime and manga series, One Piece. Now you can see the podcast crew live and in person in New York City. It's a chance to see your favorite podcast up close and potentially win some free swag. Check out the One Piece podcast at City Winery in New York City on Sunday, August 25th at 7 p.m. Just go to onepiecepodcast.com to get your tickets today. Again, that's Sunday, August 25th at 7 p.m. at City Winery in New York City. I've always felt like if I don't notice the incidental music, that means it's good. Is there like, does that?
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a bad, but is that the goal, is to just be so appropriate that we don't even notice? Because sometimes music, you feel it when it's trying to manipulate you or.
Yes.
So, I mean, was there ever a conversation like that? Like,
with animation, the music is, very, depending on the show I was working on, but, the music had to be animated too, very, and the kind of music that was written for the show. But as a rule of thumb in general, with scoring for picture, the music is not the main character. And in the audio world, the dialogue is king or queen. The dialogue is the most important thing. And then the effects, and then the music is usually the last when it comes down to the film mix. So
that's
at the mix, at the final mix, where they mix all the audio elements together, usually then, unless it's a big action scene and there's no dialogue or big sound effects, the music is mixed pretty low in volume compared to everything else. Especially these TV shows. I mean, we would work so hard as music editors on all of our editing, and we would get a lot of comments, sometimes, up to like version 5 or 6 on our work. And then we watched the show, the final show, and we could barely hear the music.
That's so frustrating.
I don't know. It's just So it just like practical. I don't know. The final note was like, "Can we hear this less?" I don't know. I don't know.
No.
I'm taken aback by that. No, sorry.
No. The editors weren't given any volume comments. It was all like, very intricate. Like, we want more of a musical comment on that when Ash falls down or whatever it is. You need to really hit that moment more, or the choice you use there is wrong. You need to find something else. So that's why I worked really hard on my music libraries to make it easier to find the right piece of music, because the searching for the right piece of music was the most time consuming part.
Those labels must have been very funny. Like, it must have been like, minor head hit, major head hit. Yeah.
Oh, they are. Yes. I was just looking back in some of my libraries to get ready for this, and I was like, the reacts. I have a folder called So HUH, HMMM.
But was that part of your job, is putting the actors' reactions in, or are you talking about a musical reaction?
Musical, musically.
Oh, I see.
Like if somebody's scratching their head,
or a
something like somebody's scratching their head, or there's something very puzzling going on in the plot, and the music has to reflect that in a little react, or this person reacted that way. So hundreds and hundreds of musical reacts. Yeah, in a musical way.
That's so funny. What a crazy, tedious part of that job, that you feel like it's gonna be artistic and all this stuff, and you're like, oh my God, I'm labeling more reacts. Like, it's so tedious. So when you were the first time you would see an episode, were you seeing the edited version of it or the unedited? Like, because they were, obviously rotoscoping and doing all this stuff. So what were you seeing?
A lot of times I got and when you say edited picture-wise, right, as far as correcting certain things and Americanizing, no, a lot of times I was seeing it before that final work was done. Like I said, the voiceovers weren't done yet. The American dubs, the character voiceovers weren't done yet. So a lot of times, I'm seeing the Japanese words on the signs. I'm seeing, maybe the gun or the cigarette in one piece, and
And were you like, what are they doing?
Yes.
like the first, I was going to say, like, you probably didn't have a background in anime. Like, in general, what was your thought? Can you believe we're talking about this 25 years later? Like, what was going through your head at the time?
Well, I honestly didn't, like, and I know you in the other podcasts as well, most of us didn't know much about Pokemon when we came on to the job. And I learned, I did learn how huge it was in Japan and was this huge sensation and was coming to the United States and was anticipated to be so big as well. So I learned about it, but definitely, I did want to mention though, when I was like 3-4 years old, my favorite TV shows were Kimba the White Lion and Speed Racer, which were both from Japan.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you were destined.
Wow.
It was
I don't know
destiny.
about that, but yeah, and also with Yu-Gi-Oh! And I worked on a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Like years and years of Yu-Gi-Oh! All the way up until, Zexal and Arc 5, post 4Kids. I worked on those 2 shows. I still don't know what's going on in that show. I never understood what was happening.
I don't disagree with you. I don't understand the game. I don't understand the show really, but my character was just being kidnapped a lot, so I didn't have to totally know what was happening. But I mean, the fact that people we worked with are still working on that show is remarkable. I mean, it's pretty 25th anniversary this year.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, definitely.
When you were studying at NYU, like I always, we all like, Steve went to art school. I was in drama. We all like fancied ourselves like very serious about our craft. So was animation on your radar at all at school? Was that something they even spoke about, or was it more like the films you'll be working on?
That's I can't remember. I do know I was aspiring to be a film composer. I think I mentioned that already. And I was studying a lot of film scoring, and audio for video was a great class I took, where I learned a lot about scoring to picture. But no, I mean, anime, no, there wasn't a whole lot of intensive conversation about it. No, I did not know that, that I'd worked so much in. And then, I also I had some other jobs outside of 4Kids that sort of, I guess 4Kids led to, which was, I worked on Word World, which was a PBS Kids animated show. I spent a couple of years working at Sesame Workshop, Children's Television Workshop, turned into Sesame Workshop. Yeah. Working with them. And I did some other animated sort of other shows as well. But
in terms of the way 4Kids worked, is it much, much different than other places? I know John Siegler said, like, people have asked him, like, what was the method? Because they got so much done in such a short period of time. So what were the major differences you saw there?
Yeah, it was a massive amount of work, nonstop. From my experience as a music editor specifically, I think it was definitely the hardest, most intricate, most creative music editing I've ever done on any work. And I'm talking about compared to, Hollywood feature films or any other TV work I did. Anything else compared to what I did with 4Kids was so much easier. So much easier.
Wow. But okay, but like, can you, because again, we're just like lay people. Why? Like, what is it, the speed, or was it the amount?
Well, they wanted wall-to-wall music, almost wall-to-wall music in every episode, and also in the films, which I'd love to talk to you about as well.
Yes.
Almost wall-to-wall music. So you had to fill everything with some kind of background musical comment, or if it's an action scene, a piece of music that scores the action. I got really good at scoring to picture and as if a composer is doing it. However, I was just cutting music, or I would use a lot of tool. Like I had tools in my toolbox to, make things sound as if, not edited, make it sound as if the composer is actually doing it. And it's hard.
So like if you needed 30 seconds and you only had a 26-second, you had to finagle it to like stretch it.
Yes.
And, okay.
Or, usually I'd have longer pieces of music that I just had to extract the right part of that piece of music into the scene, but not make it sound like I just cut blunt ends of the piece of music into the scene. It had to sound like a beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
And I actually learned how to do that at Billos Debucci Music when I was at that music house, because they would write 30-second long advertised pieces of music for a commercial, and they'd ask me to cut it down to a 15-second. They'd have a 15-second version of the commercial, and I'd have to cut the 30-second piece of music down to the 15-second version and make it look good. So that's where I learned.
And that's why they need an actual musician to be doing this, because someone who's not a musician doesn't have an ear for this.
It definitely helps to be a musician, to be a good music editor. So I certainly know good music editors who are not musicians, but they are probably, their exposure to music goes, pretty deep, and their understanding of music is probably quite profound. But to be a good music editor, and what I found from my own experience is when you're editing to picture, a lot of times you have to solve a musical puzzle. Like you need to hit something and keep it musically sound. Like if there's an event on picture and your music, you need to find a musical accent that'll hit that event on picture and keep it in the same tempo on the beat, or a beat, maybe on the third beat in the measure. So understanding tempo and meter and even key, like when you're transitioning from one piece of music to another within a scene, let's say, to treat that very, very sensitively and understand, like, it might rub if it's totally different key and they're overlapping. Or, understand, like listening to just how you make something flow and thinking like a composer. So, and I have studied composition too, and I've studied film composition. So that has really helped me so much, understanding how to think like a composer when I'm editing music.
Did you ever push back again about the wall-to-wall music? Were you ever like, this is a moment that should be silent?
Yes, absolutely. As I gained more and more experience and, I was the senior music editor there. I definitely could make more creative decisions. And I think as years went by, they didn't even hand me cue sheets anymore. They just would give me I'm trying to remember, just give me the episode and say, Sue, figure it out. Which is better though, because then I can decide where music belongs and where there could be some silence.
Do you recall, like on average, how many different shows you were working on per week?
Well, usually at the most 2 episodes a week, because like I said, there's so much music needed and it was so much work in it. I usually get a little under a week for an episode. If I was like back in the old days with Pokémon, and it was a lot of editing. I think I would get a little under a week to get it done, and it was a hard deadline. Like, this is TV and it needs to be done by this time. So, and I was working out of my home for a long time. I was working out of my apartment in Manhattan.
Why was
for
that?
Years.
Like, did they not have the space there, or was it?
So, that 53 West 23rd Street location, was that where it was?
I think so. That sounds right.
So here, I'm going to mind my memory for a second here. When I first started there with Pokémon, rave music was at that space.
In that space.
And developed that amazing recording studio setup with the live room in the middle and all the separate studios surrounding it. And I was working out of my house. Like they didn't have a room for me. I was a contractor. I wasn't an employee. Okay. And I wasn't an employee of 4Kids. I was just freelancing, like working job to job for them. I actually got hired on salary with them years later. And then I actually got my little room in the second building. So there was a 10th floor and there were two buildings that were
they knocked down a wall,
floors of two buildings. And there was a little connector between the buildings on the 10th floor there. There's
crazy.
A huge amount of real estate for 4Kids. So I got my little room there at some point. But still, they would let me take leaves of absence to get on jobs.
Well, see, I was thinking this whole time, I was picturing you at their offices and that you could like run down the hall and say, hey, we need another little music blurb, whatever.
No.
So that wasn't the case. So that's a little bit tricky because I was thinking that was so unique to 4Kids that you guys were all in the same space. But you were...
We were towards the end. But no, I mean, I had to work with just the music they gave me. There was no way, if you're asking if I could ask for somebody to play a saxophone for no.
Right,
there was no
that's
possibility.
What I was...
No, I mean, I could call up the composers, but they were working furiously too back then, Manny and John. And then, there were more and more composers that were hired on later on. They were too busy for me to ask for.
Were you allowed to use music from one show on another if it was completely appropriate?
No. Pokemon music was Pokemon music.
Okay.
Yu-Gi-Oh music was Yu-Gi-Oh music. Turtles music was Turtles music. Absolutely. 100%.
Like someone asked a question online, like there's something that they thought they heard years later in a film. Like, were you ever able to use generic or go to forgive me for not getting the right, royalty free or some kind of generic music? Were you ever able to do that?
Rarely.
So it happens sometimes. Okay.
I don't think so, honestly. Again, it's because of the back end. The license. They don't want to license music from somewhere else. They want it all to be 4Kids owned music. Except for those Japanese cues that were kept in some of the episodes of Pokemon.
And then you work on the movies. And the movies we recorded somewhere else. Were you working somewhere else to do the movie? Tell us about the movie experience, please.
I spent the most time on the first, the Mewtwo, the Pokemon, the first movie. What was it called? I always called it Mewtwo.
Mewtwo Strikes Back.
Oh, Mewtwo. Yes, so we always just called it Mewtwo. That I worked on from beginning to end, to the bitter end. And honestly, when I got hired to do, and I was still working on the TV show and maybe a couple other shows when they started working on the film. And they said, Sue, we want you to stop what you're doing and work on the film only. They had by then had enough extra music editors to take on whatever I was working on TV. And they just threw this pile of, I was completely blown away. I had already started working for Howard Shore on films by then, so I knew how to work on films, on feature-length films as a music editor. But this was Ralph Schuckett was the main composer, the wonderfully talented Ralph Schuckett, who unfortunately passed away not too long ago. Wonderful, wonderful, talented guy. He was the main composer on that film, but then we also had, 5 or 6 other composers doing smaller cues, or of course there's the short Pikachu Vacation ahead of the feature. So there were a couple, like John Lissauer and Manny Corallo did a lot in that one for that first film. There was so much organizational work to have to be to get, just to organize all those composers and get their assignments and get them organized, that it was an overwhelming amount of work at first, and a lot of people to talk to. The music recording studios, the music mixer, getting everything lined up, all the ducks in a row. But we did it. But it was in LA. So we went out to LA and we recorded the music in I believe it was in Calabasas, a recording studio, smaller recording studio there, recorded all of the live musicians. So there was a budget for this film. It was very nice. We had live orchestral musicians. And then the music was mixed in Hollywood. There was, the connection was, Ralph Schuckett was very good friends with a music engineer who worked for Dieter Meyer of the band Yellow.
Oh.
And so this mixer had worked with Ralph. And so he was hired as the music mixer. And the basement of Dieter Meyer's Hollywood mansion was a full-on state-of-the-art recording studio, music recording and mixing studio for Yellow.
So this must have been so much fun for you guys.
It was amazing.
I mean, everyone was, we always talk about this. Like, everyone was super young at this. Like, this was a lot of people's first job. Like, what a cool experience to have.
Yeah.
I had no idea it was done in LA. Okay.
Yeah. So, and it was a massive amount of work, a massive amount of music to record. Okay. So there's hours and hours and hours of recording all these musicians. What's so funny? I just remembered this. This is before I had a cell phone. I had a beeper. And I just remembered being at that recording studio with the, recording the musicians and having a beeper. So whenever Julian Schwartz, do you know about Julian? He was a music producer.
Yeah, I remember Julian.
So he was back in New York City, back at 4Kids, and he'd be calling me 5 times a day. But he wouldn't be calling me, he'd be beeping me. And then I had to go find a phone on the wall. I'm dating myself.
Oh, God. Pagers. Yeah, so I get it.
So the recording and the mixing, and this is a good story about Ralph Schuckett. It's a massive amount of music, orchestral music that he was writing. And, he was, he was a rock musician, and he also played on Carole King's Tapestry. He was with John Siegler in, Ralph is amazing. He played with Rundgren, with John Siegler. He was working around the clock writing this music while the recording sessions were going on. He was running in with music, and then pieces that he didn't need live musicians for, while we started mixing the music in that Hollywood mansion basement. He was writing furiously, and then so exhausted that he would take a nap in the live room. He found a couch pillow, and he would, while we were mixing whatever cue he just finished, he would lie down in the sound booth with the couch pillow and take a nap.
Oh my God.
And we got it done. So I think I have the CD of the first movie's music, but I don't have, for some reason, I still don't have a copy of the film, and I'll have to just watch it on YouTube or something. But one of the very last pieces of music that Ralph wrote, it was a little piano piece. It was at the very end of the film, and it was sort of the, everything's better, everything's okay now. And it was a short little cue. He had forgotten about it, or everything else was so much more important. He hadn't written it yet. And we were really at the last, it was almost time for us to go to the final film mix back in New York at Sound One. And he was like, oh my God, I have to write this. And he sat down at the piano there at that studio, and he wrote it in 15 minutes. And it's the most beautiful, sweet little tune. And I want to call it up, so I have to go find it. But he just, it came out of his head, and it was fantastic. And he just created it sort of out of the blue, and we mixed it real quick, it's fantastic. So, the music mixer was Martin Kloiber. So that was the music mixer for that first film. And then this other films I didn't work on quite as much. I did work on the Pokemon 2000 film.
As the music editor who's there in the room when they're recording this and stuff, do you get to have input hey, you know what? Actually, this will make a great stem. Later, we're going to use this. Hey, can you, or is it you're taking whatever they give you and not really inputting your opinion on that yet?
Say that again.
Or are you just making mental notes? So are you, when you're watching all this, are you interacting with Ralph hey, here's what I'm going to need? Or are you more just taking it all in?
That's not my job. So the producers were John Leffler, Norman Grossfeld, and Michael Hagney, who, by the way, Norman and Michael, they were hilarious. I think they wrote most of the script for the movie.
Yeah, you can hear them do a commentary track. You should listen to watch the movie with their commentary track. And they talk about the music. Norman talks about a lot of places where there wasn't music and they needed it. So
yes,
you'll find that part interesting. Yeah.
But Norman and Michael, they were the main producer, director / producers, and they were the ones to direct the composers as to what, and maybe John Siegler. I think, did John Siegler write any? I can't remember if he wrote anything for the film, but they were the ones to directed the composers. I was the one who would receive the music, and if it needed to be edited in any way, I would adjust them. Not so much for the film, because everything was scored to picture for the film, but I had to keep things organized. So I was keeping, it was a massive amount of material.
Every bit of incidental music was recorded to picture. That's so interesting. I didn't realize
in the
that.
film.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I didn't draw any. No, because it was produced for to sound really good, to be played in theaters, and so everything was produced. So it would be mixed in surround and be ready for big theaters, and so all of that music was written originally for the films. Yeah, I worked on, I guess, the first 3 Pokemon films I worked on, for sure.
That's pretty awesome. Did you also work on Pokemon Live, the stage musical?
I did.
What did you do on that?
Let's
talk. We haven't spoken enough about that on this show.
That was funny.
Yes.
But I mean, my job there, what I did was just the same as I did on the TV show. And it was mostly songs, right? I mean, it was as far as music was concerned in the live show, they were singing songs. It was like a musical. So, but there were a few areas, I can't remember, maybe 10 or 20 different areas where they wanted a little bit of that incidental filler music to keep it so it wasn't too quiet. And it's too bad they didn't have live musicians. That's all I have to say.
I know.
Not that I want to take myself away from the project, but it would have been nice to have a small little band to do that, because, it was recorded music, and there was someone sitting, I would find the little cues that needed to be inserted wherever they needed to be inserted. And then there was then they were loaded into a laptop, and somebody had to trigger those for when it was time to have that music play underneath whatever was going on.
So were you going to rehearsals? Would you
I did go to a couple of rehearsals. I didn't have to. I think I just got to go. Radio City Music Hall.
Yeah. So what did you think of this musical extravaganza? Do you remember? I mean, you don't have to.
It was one of a kind. It was, I'll be diplomatic. It was one of a kind. It was unique. Never going to see anything like that ever again.
Yes. Well, I mean, that is the whole reason Susie ended up getting the job, because her boyfriend at the time saw you at the musical or something, and she just said...
Yeah, no, we were really good friends. Miles and I went to NYU together. He was in my music technology program, and I couldn't figure out who... I had a +1. I was not like dating anybody at the time, I guess, so I didn't know who to bring with to the big premiere at Radio City Music Hall. And I was like, who's going to want to see this? Who should I? So Miles, who worked at at Sesame Workshop, was like, well, yeah, all right. So that's how Susie found out about it.
Yeah, he'll sit through this thing. Yeah, but she just remembers hearing there was a character who drew on the other characters' faces when they were sleeping. Like,
is that Jigglypuff?
She just heard the weird, and she didn't know what Pokemon was. Yes, good memory.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I remember the actors and dancers were really talented. And then Darren Dunstan, I was reminded, that he was fantastic.
Yeah. They were working their butts off, man, on that stage. They were, It was a good group. I mean, from what I've seen, like, we watched Susie and I actually watched a documentary about it. It seemed like, again, all these talented people, but with a really compressed timeline to do this work that maybe should have taken longer, is what it kind of sounds like to me, was maybe where things didn't work. But again, I mean, all these talented people, it happens all the time with musicals, though. Like, I just saw another show's closing today, and I'm like, these people work for years and years, and it's
on paper it probably was a great idea, but I actually don't know what happened. I think they went on tour beyond New York, right?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
They had a moderately successful tour. I think it's just that, like, the write-ups probably weren't as kind as they would have liked, and it didn't last as long. They had, bigger aspirations, and they did shoot it with, like, a major shoot for to release on video, and those are lost somewhere. Norman was saying he doesn't know where those are. Like,
I know.
Because that would be fun to see a really good recording of it.
That would be.
Make Darren watch that one day. Yeah. His Giovanni days.
I was like thinking back because you said you were working at home a lot during these days, and you're responsible for basically creating a huge library of just all these tracks, at least. What was the home setup like? Like how? Because it's a lot much. It's so much easier now because we have just like digital drives and all that. Like, were you working on like a huge like external hard drive physically or something? I'm curious what that was.
So back then, when I first worked on Pokemon, I had a very, very early on version of Pro Tools hardware, which I can't even remember the name of it anymore. And it was the basic Pro Tool setup, because all I really needed to do was listen off my speakers. I did do some input. I did record sometimes, not for Pokemon, but for other jobs I was doing, like with Sesame Street. I did a lot of arrangements of old Sesame Street music, and I would record musicians in my apartment. So I had Pro Tools. I had a small mixing board. I had my Mac. I had a small rack of outboard gear, which included some synthesizers, which I also used for composing, arranging on the side, not for 4Kids. I really didn't do a whole lot I did some tiny little compositions, if you want to call them, for certain shows when there was nothing else available, just to filler a little bit of here and there, but not a whole lot. And then I had a keyboard controller. I had TV and VCR. Back in the old days, we did not have digital video yet. Everything is so much easier now. And then, I had an 88 key MIDI piano as well, but I just used that for my own stuff. So that was my home setup. And then when I moved into 4Kids, I got a laptop. And again, it was like I had a portable.
It weighed 20 pounds.
Yeah. Travel. Like I had a travel Pro Tools setup by then, because I actually had to travel sometimes, and I would still work for 4Kids from wherever I was. So I had a smaller, no mixing board, just a small setup that I could take anywhere. And that's what I used when I ended up at 4Kids. When I finally was able to work on site at 4Kids, I had my little room. And this is funny. It was in the second building. There were the two buildings, 10th floor, two buildings. And I was in the second building. And I had my little room, and the music department was mostly there, except for John Siegler's really awesome office, which had a view of the Empire State Building. We used to go in there during rainstorms and watch lightning hit the Empire State Building. But I had my little office and my little setup. And as it turned out, once Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started happening, that whole second 10th floor of that second building was taken over by Turtles, except for our little music offices, which is me, Mike Brady, and I can't remember who else had a little office there. But the rest was animators and producers of Turtles. And there were a lot of animators. And I have to say, that was one of the best things about working there, was seeing that whole process, creating an animated show from scratch.
Yeah.
I will say those animators were really rowdy. And I keep my door closed.
That's what Steve does. Steve knows those rowdy animators.
They were noisy. So I had to keep of course I kept my door closed anyway, but even with my door closed, they were so noisy. I think I ended up I had to just work with headphones at all times.
That's funny.
because, I was outnumbered. They were working, and that's the way animators work. They have to be noisy and rowdy, I guess.
And now they're all working from home. Like Steve, Steve works completely from home now.
Yeah. Now we just sit in silence. Or I mean, at least like I never quite had like that experience, but I think also, I don't know. I think probably if it's like the Turtles people, they're probably having to act all this stuff out themselves and kind of like get this.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And they worked fast
they
too.
Be rambunctious,
Speaking of a lot of work, they worked really fast too. But it was fun. That was fun to be a part of that. And I worked on Turtles too.
Oh, okay.
But I must say the favorite show I worked on of all of the 4Kids shows was probably Viva Piñata.
Oh.
I thought that was the funniest show. I loved that
because
show.
you like the show or from a music point of view? Okay, so from a music point of view. Okay. What was it about that music?
Both.
Okay.
Both. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was funny. And I liked the animation and I liked the music. The music was fun and easier to edit.
Well, what made it easier to edit? That's interesting.
Well, by then I'd been working there for a long time, and so I kind of had a system. I knew how to just digest each show and the assignments I had, and I also knew how to get a really good music library that was streamlined. And it was funny. There was a lot of and John Siegler wrote a lot of music in that, and he's hilarious. His music can be really funny. Somebody should look this up. There was one episode on Viva Piñata where the bad guy, what's the bad guy's name?
I don't know.
There was some kind of a vaudeville show they had to put on, and somehow he ended up on stage, the bad guy, and he had to do a song and dance to like get off stage. And John Siegler wrote this little piece called "Thank You, No, I Have to Go," and it was hilarious. I wish I could find it now and play it for you guys.
Well, I was going to say, what did you keep anything? Like, did you keep any toys or musical cues or scripts?
My God, yes.
What did you keep from those days?
Oh, I have in a closet in a plastic storage bin, an unopened, I looked it up on eBay. It's actually not worth that much, but it's a 3-pack it's the Japanese 3-pack of 3 of the Pokemon the starters figures.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And I never opened that one. I got a bundle of merch back after the first movie, after Mewtwo. I got T-shirts, I got toys, and I gave away most of it. In fact, funny enough, Howard Shore asked for some, or I gave some to him for, I think, his nieces or nephews or some children, family members. He was very excited to get back after the first movie when it was a big deal.
We were not thinking of eBay back then, unfortunately. Yeah.
No, I gave away my pictures of my nieces and nephews wearing the T-shirts, and there was a little Pikachu. And I did get a Pikachu. I think my daughter has it now somewhere in her toy chest, but I have a little plastic Pikachu. That was my first. And I have a little Mew.
Oh,
a little Mew.
That's a good one.
That I still have.
I know. See, again, wish we kept I got the jacket from that movie. That was the only time they gave me anything was a jacket from and I think I gave it to Goodwill. I know, so dumb. So dumb. Yeah, if you ever come across, people love reading old scripts, hearing stuff that got cut or whatever. So if you ever come across that, the fans will eat it up. No pressure, just saying. If you're sitting on a magical lost episode or something.
I saved newspaper clippings that I realized what a big deal that first movie was. I saved like the Time magazine front cover. It was on the front page of Time magazine, so I saved that. I have some things in a bin somewhere. I'm a saver.
Yeah.
And I have some TMNT. Comic books.
Oh, that's cool. So, working on the original shows versus the dubbed shows, you probably had a lot more to do on the new animation because there was no Japanese original. So were those much harder projects? I know it sounds like you enjoyed them.
Like Turtles?
Yeah, like Turtles or Viva Piñata.
I don't remember them being harder. I feel like because I had sharpened my skills on all the previous shows that No, I think by then I definitely in a groove,
Right.
And there were composers writing original music for those shows. Like I said, definitely each show had their own distinct musical world.
Was there a major difference for you, like going from an action adventure show like Yu-Gi-Oh to like a Winx Club or Tom and Friends, which is like a much younger show? Like, what was the major difference in the stylistically? Did they still want wall-to-wall music in every
a lot
genre?
Almost wall-to-wall usually. So Yu-Gi-Oh was very formulaic. There was a formula to Yu-Gi-Oh! There was always those battles and there was battle music. It was very specific. And sometimes like the, what was it? Blue Eyes, White Dragon, or what am I saying it right?
Yep.
There was like certain dragons. Did I get that right? Blue Eyes, White Dragon.
Yeah,
or was there a blue dragon too? White Eyes, Blue Dragon. I can't remember. But they had their own themes.
I don't know. Oh, they
Blue
had,
Eyes.
Okay. They had certain monsters. Are they called monsters? They had their own themes and their own, action themes. Where when Yu-Gi-Oh would throw out that one or however they appeared, they had their own specific themes. And that's in a lot of shows. Certain characters had their own themes, but especially with Yu-Gi-Oh, there were themes. And if a new character came on, a composer would be assigned to write a theme for that new entity or character. And then I would reuse that music anytime those characters came up. And so with Yu-Gi-Oh specifically, it was very much a formulaic type thing, and very dark. So there was a lot of dark music, a lot of, pulsing, dark, forbidding type music. Not a whole lot of like, incidental, funny scenes. Although sometimes when they were in school, right, there'd be like, they go to school and there'd be rarely though, but so Yu-Gi-Oh was definitely different from, Winx. So with Winx,
right,
there was a formula to Winx too. I can't remember, but that was like all fairy and light music. I mean, talk about diametric opposites of those two shows,
right?
As far as music goes.
I would imagine your mindset is so different too. Like working a full day on Yu-Gi-Oh versus working one of the other shows. Yeah. Like your mood must be, because my mood is so affected by music.
Yes.
So how does that happen to you? Like,
I don't want to gain enemies or fans of, if there are fans of One Piece out there. But when I was working on One Piece, I was
there's one right there. But yes,
really stressed out. I would get so stressed out because it was so violent. I think that was a really fun, wasn't it?
It was very, yes.
It was a long time ago.
They changed it to not be. But yes, if you were working off of the original, right, Steve?
As you said, if you were working off the Japanese materials, then
and there was blood like flying everywhere. And it was One Piece.
They took all that out. They replaced all that blood with something else. But yeah, when you watched it,
honestly, I think I called John Siegler. I think I called Siegler up and I said, John, I need a break from One Piece. It's stressing me out.
Oh God.
Yeah, because you're immersed.
Magical Do-Re-Mi was like so cutesy and fun, and that was really easy because each girl had their own song, and they always came out with their song during the episodes. That was an easy one.
So you would use like an instrumental version of their main song as like when they entered or things like that?
No, I think they sang. There was always a point during that where they sang their song when they wasn't there some kind of magical transformation with them?
There was a lot
too,
of music in that show.
For sure.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So, there were songs that were their songs that had to happen when a certain thing happened. So that was an easy show. Go-Go Riki was a riot. That was one of the last shows I worked on.
Yeah. That was a Russian show, actually.
Yes, it came from Russia.
So interesting.
And it was so cute. And the music was hilarious. And Tama and Friends was just like this soft and cuddly.
That was sweet.
Experience. Very sweet.
Yeah. So when you were there at the last days of 4Kids, did you see that like this place might not make it? Like how was the writing on the wall for you?
Again, so I was there. I was in-house at my office up until the end of 2003. And then I actually moved to Colorado. And then I started working remotely from where I am now. Mm-hmm. So I was not actually there as things started to, change.
Yeah.
But, Mike Brady was my main contact, and Julian Schwartz and John Siegler. I was on the phone with them every day, with whatever I was working on. So yeah, I mean, I knew it was happening, kind of.
Yeah. And then you were able to continue working on Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit. Is the process different working on Yu-Gi-Oh! Post 4Kids? Like, was the timeline shift, or was it basically a finely tuned machine?
It was very, very similar, actually. And a lot of the same composers were brought on to the the Zexal and Arc-V, those two that I worked on. Mike Brady, he's terrific. I think he still works over at Konami.
Yes, he's a Konami now, yeah.
He got to move into John Siegler's office, which is a haloed space. He's the one that got that off.
Oh, yes. God.
The haloed space, the beautiful. And I asked Mike, because as things were changing hands and moving around, I was like, Mike, are you going to, well, I think it was 4K Media first,
yes.
And then it turned to Konami. And when Konami came in, I was like, Mike, are you going to be able to stay in that office? He's like, nobody's taking this office from me. No matter.
That's funny.
So he was the producer, or still is, for all the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise, I believe, music producer. So he was my contact and my boss for those shows. It was pretty much the same, and used a lot of the same composers. So, keeping that sound the same as the earlier shows, the musical soundscape. And, that same sort of formulaic thing with the battles and the leading up to the battles and that kind of dark
That's
world.
The formula, yeah. So I hear you have a little bit of a fun sound file for us that we might enjoy sharing with the folks out there. What is it that you have there?
Yeah, I have a scratch track of a song from Winx, and it was John Siegler has sent it over to me as a placeholder so I would know sort of the tempo and key of the piece that I was editing into and out of, which every once in a while they do that for me, which is a very nice thing to do. So this was a scratch track, and I was one of the Winx girls was going to end up singing it. But I believe John Siegler, he wrote it with Russ Velasquez. And Russ, so I believe this is John Siegler singing scratch track in his absolute most wonderful, talented falsetto.
Let's embarrass. So I will play the...
Oh, and the reason I'm doing this is because I've been waiting years and years to just get back at him, because this is ancient history now, but when I moved out to Colorado, I was still working full time for 4Kids remotely. And he knew my birthday was coming up, my 40th birthday. And so to celebrate me getting so old and turning 40, he sent me a big box in the mail for my birthday. And I opened it up and it was a walker.
What a jerk.
He sent me a walker.
And that's not just like a big box. That's like a ridiculous box.
So I call him up like, Siegler, you sent me a walker? I'm going to get you back. So here it is.
So now you have your revenge, Siegler. So this is going to be we're going to try to get this up on YouTube. Maybe we'll play it at the end of this episode for you. Yes, I cannot wait to hear that. Oh, I really want, it's just one chance to grab a boy and start to dance. And all you got to do is move your feet. 'Cause baby, here's the girl, and this is the beat. All I really want is just one chance to grab a boy and start to dance. All you got to do is move your feet. 'Cause baby, here's the girl, and this is the beat. Post 4Kids, is there anything you want to tell us about, anything fun that stands out to you in your time, or things you learned at 4Kids that you've used in later jobs?
I learned from 4Kids how to work fast and work for a deadline, like a huge amount of work for a deadline. So I have worked on other TV series, like I mentioned, Word World, and more recently I worked on Bubble Guppies.
Oh.
So the music producer of Bubble Guppies is Nathaniel Reichman, who was he was way back when hired on as a music editor that I trained.
Oh, wow.
As a music editor for some of the 4Kids shows. And maybe even, I think he worked on Ultraman. So I actually was the music producer and was like training music editors and coordinating with music editors for Ultraman. And I think he was one of them. So he ended up hiring me on quite a few different things, Word World and Bubble Guppies more recently. And so, by now I'm really seasoned as far as working on TV with hard deadlines and understanding what the producers want, as far as underscoring animation. And then, I've worked on some films, and I've actually been lucky enough, especially with the pandemic, everybody
you were a pioneer.
Remotely. Nobody could get together in a studio. So I've worked on a couple of Netflix films in the past few years, like during the pandemic and after the pandemic. And everybody was remote. So everything was just flying around the internet, high speed internet, just
no VHS tapes.
You get the picture, I just get the picture up, they post it up up on a virtual drive, and I'd get everything and then deliver all my work the same way. So I've worked on a number of films since, and I'm working right now pretty steadily on a music library for BMG, the record label.
Oh, that's interesting.
BMG,
okay.
Music library work, which is not to picture. I just do cut downs and create 30 and 15-second pieces of music for the music libraries.
Oh, that's
thousands
so cool.
and thousands of pieces of music.
I was gonna say that job will take forever. That's a that's
a
job
so
that
it's
will
seasonal.
never end.
I get like batches. I get batches quarterly, and then I fit in other work in between. And
yeah, and I think it's great that people can hear that you're not based in New York or LA, and that you can do this job from other places. I know, we always have people listening who want to work in this industry and all that. So it's a great example of someone who you established yourself in a big city, and then if you're good enough,
need to start out in person, and then I basically was working virtually out of my apartment in Manhattan at first too. So it's not that much different from back then on the early Pokemon days to now, where I'm back in my own apartment and working on shows and delivering them virtually. So,
yes, you were ahead of your time.
But it was a great experience, and great music team, Siegler and Julian and Mike, and we had a good time together. It was fun when it wasn't really hard.
Yeah. Last question. Do you ever blow people's minds or kids' minds when you say, oh, I worked on Pokemon or one of those shows?
Yes. Actually, believe it or not, my daughter's 15 now, and one of her best friends is a big Pokemon. Mm-hmm. He plays the games, the Pokemon Go or whatever are
There's a lot of them.
Video games that are popular now. So I'm so ignorant of all of that. I'm sorry. Okay. I don't even know. So when he found out, he was really, really impressed.
You pull out the Pokemon card.
Yes, yes, it still happens. Still happens.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. We really, really do appreciate it.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Oh, Sue Shufro, she was fantastic. What a sweetheart. And really, that is a cool job.
Mm-hmm. I think, because it's someone who's very much involved with the majority of the shows there. If not, I didn't say all of them, because I think she said, like, once we were talking after the interview that, there was one show and, she didn't work on it all, but she got a good sense
they finally hired more people. Yeah.
Yeah. And she got a good sense of what most of these shows were all about, or at least in the Japanese side of things.
Yeah.
A little too much blood in One Piece. But you
can answer this for me, since you watch. Like, did that trend of the Americans of the Americanization, like doing the wall-to-wall music more than the Japanese did. Is that still a thing today? Or is that was that just a 4Kids thing?
That might be a 4Kids thing at this point now. I haven't been keeping up with a lot of animation for the youngins these days, but as far as I can recall on some or at least original animation shows, I don't think that's so much of a concern.
Right.
At least from what I can remember watching like Cartoon Network shows and stuff in recent memory. In terms of like anime dubs, and considering there's not too many dubs that are specifically targeted towards kids, I don't know if it's the same way. I don't know. Now
now I want to start listening for that more. Yeah. That's something and again, like I said, like if I don't notice the music, then it's probably great because it's guiding you. It's like you don't want it hitting you over the head with how to feel, but it's guiding you emotionally. And I think that's what's so cool about her job is, you know, in addition to the way we read the line, or maybe we did a shitty line read that they're using and they do need more music to guide, or the script didn't offer enough of a direction for where things were going. And so it's such an important part of all of this incidental music that I feel like people don't think about as often as they do the actor performances. And the music people should be getting just as much credit and attention.
It's a team effort.
It really is. How strange, too, that someone was working remotely. Like, I really was not picturing that at all. So that was really cool to hear that she was not in the actual office. I'm sure... You know, I should have asked her, like, if she became more productive once she was in the office, it was easier to get stuff done. But it sounds like she was so good at her job at that point that everything became easier because she knew how to label everything and make the libraries, and it just was a faster process.
And very close by, too, regardless.
Yes, that's true, too. She wasn't, like, down in Soho.
That's a nice little walk. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Not when it's cold and rainy, though.
Oh, no. You don't want to trip and all those tapes fall into like a deceiving puddle on a New York City street that just looks like concrete.
Oh, dude, it's raining in LA today. I pressed snooze for 2 hours today.
Oh yeah, I took my time getting up too.
2 hours. I feel like really guilty about that. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. I was like, I'm just gonna get up. I'm gonna get a lot of stuff done this morning.
No. And it's rain in LA, so we got to take advantage of it.
We don't know what to do when it rains here. I'm going to order in some soup, maybe.
I think I might do the same. So.
Yeah, well, this episode's probably going to air in the summer when it's not raining here. But
it's blistering, but we'll look back on it fondly.
We're wusses. Well, thank you so much to Sue. Thank you for you guys for listening. 4kidsflashback.com, patreon.com/4kidsflashback, youtube.com/@4kidsflashback. We appreciate you? I shouldn't have said that like a question. We appreciate you. Do you appreciate them, Steve? Tell them from your heart how you feel about the listeners. I love to put Steve on the spot.
You know, thanks for always coming through every week and giving us a listen, giving us a little comment, telling us what you liked about the show. You know, that means a lot to me. Thank you.
Are you like me? See, this is why people shouldn't press stop yet. Like, when I hear a podcast winding down, I often jump to like the next episode or the next show I'm listening to. So I wonder who actually listens to this outro-y stuff. If it's you, tell us. Tell us if you listen to the outro.
Yeah, the real ones.
The real fans.
Yeah.
Because anything could happen right now.
Right. We could announce that we found all the missing tapes of like Ultramantiga.
That's right. We could announce something, or that we got it.
But it could happen.
It could happen. I'll stop talking now because we will.
Catch you next time.
4Kids Flashback is a production of Maji Media, hosted by Tara Sands and Steve Yurko.
Producers are Zach Logan, Tara Sands, and Steve Yurko.
For more information, go to 4kidsflashback.com. That is the number 4. And if you worked at 4Kids and have a story you want to share, please email us at 4kidsflashback@gmail.com.
You can find us on social media at 4Kids Flashback, and to listen early and ad-free, head to patreon.com/4kidsflashback. For podcast merchandise, find links on our website and Linktree.
As they say on every podcast, if you liked this show, please subscribe, rate, and review, and tell your friends or four. If you want to check out other Maji Media podcasts, go to maji.media. Thanks for listening.